The greatest ending in anime, Code Geass's War Arc by Nux Taku. Now, I haven't really reacted to anything Nux Taku. Being a male VTuber, seen a lot of Nux Taku. I've seen him interact with a bunch of large creators, seen him interact with many, many other creators. And knowing that he likes anime, I mean, we see the red X from Teen Titans on there. Well, not necessarily anime. Talking about anime today in regards to Code Geass. It is a series that I have followed for past 15 or so years and have based a lot of my modern philosophies off of things presented in the show. It is a story that transcends its media. Code Geass is a story about classism. It's a story about losing your identity. It's a story about gaining a new identity. It's a story about, so many, many things, the power, evil, the choices you have. And to see people talk about the ending of Code Geass specifically R2, is always interesting and fascinating to me because it wraps the series up in such a way that is both definitive and ambiguous and can lead to room to a lot of interpretation or lack thereof. So I'm very curious what Nux Taku has to say on the subject, and we'll be going through this as professionally as I can.
For many years, Code Geass was my favorite anime of all time, and to this day, it remains at the very top of my list. One of these many reasons why I love it so dearly is, well, two reasons: Colin's boobs! And the other more relevant reason, at least more relevant to this video, of why I loved Code Geass to this insane extent is because Code Geass had my personal favorite ending to any.
Honestly, I get the Colin love, I do. Was more of a C2 fan. I have a thing for apathetic, strong female characters. Let's put it that way. I have an absolute thing for the trope of an immortal witch that's just apathetic. C2 is just built different, is all I'm gonna say.
Anime of all time. The finale of Code Geass is so fantastic. Every time I rewatch the series, the final twist is on my mind for days. And believe it or not, it's built off the back of a war arc. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of my war arc analysis series where I'm uploading daily because I'm an idiot, but also an—
God, I feel that. Oh my God. There was a point in time I was doing up to 4 React videos a day. And keep in mind, that's just React videos. That's not edited content like this. This takes time. This takes effort. This takes a lot of work, which is why I want to do so as ethically and as respectfully as I can. It takes a lot of work to put videos out like this, especially videos on topics like this, which may be perceived as divisive or maybe perceived as not necessarily the most popular. I would argue that if you are curious on Code Geass, why I like it so much, why it continues to be my favorite anime, and why I recommend it so much, I definitely recommend you go and watch it. Even if you just take some time to yourself and just watch it and let the story unfold. There's a lot to unpack with it.
Absolute mad lad. Videos that normally take like a week to make, but hey, to all the editors that have been helping me thus far, you guys are the real MVPs. In fact, Jack, his boy, who's editing this video, just hit 1,000 subs on his channel.
That's
Link
awesome.
his channel in the description. Feel free to send him my love. And my cringe! But back to Code Geass for a moment. I've discussed—
Yes, this series was clamp. Allegedly, I have yet to have citation on this. Code Geass, in its inception, someone told, I believe it was Sunrise, make Gundam, but with Char Aznable as the main character. Allegedly, this is the inception of the idea of Code Geass. I have yet to have citation on it. You can provide citation on that. I'm very curious down in the description.
Discussed various war
Comments,
arcs
man.
until this point. I've discussed the 7 Deadly Sins war arc, where the purpose is to thematically finish the tale of every character. The Black Clover war arc, which is to thematically jive with the entirety of the story. The One Piece Marineford war, to expand the universe and as the ultimate beginning point of an entirely new journey in One Piece. Now, this is along with many others that I've discussed, but none are quite like Code Geass because I've selected these wars specifically because each is beautiful in its own way.
There are multiple conflicts that happen throughout. In R1, we had the Black Rebellion. In R2, we had the Second Black Rebellion. And in R2 as well, we did have, after this specific... I have seen this scene so many times. It's so good because Danny Young Bosch, Lelouch's VA, does such a good job here. All of the voice actors do a good job here. It is such a... You could argue that this itself is a conflict, a war of ideology between Charles Z. Britannia and Lelouch, Suzaku, and C2. And you obviously have Marianne in there as well on Charles' side. It's a very good conflict that isn't fought with swords. It's not fought with weapons. It's not fought with anything other than words and ideology. It's about the fate of humanity. Charles wants a world of stagnation. He wants a world where the world, the lives of the living and the dead can combine. It is a enclosed space. It is a closed system. It is a world without change or variation. Whereas people would get, as Lelouch, Suzaku, and C2 state, it is a world that would be empty, a world of stagnation, an unchanging world that would benefit only Charles and Marianne. And it's such a good episode if you haven't seen it. This scene specifically, I have watched numerous times. It is nothing short of beautiful, which then we lead into the crescendo, where Schneisel was the final perfect opponent for Lelouch. A war of ideology. Schneisel fights for the present. Charles fought for the past. Lelouch fights for a future, for humanity, for others, to live in a world where people like the Japanese aren't reduced to mere numbers, to 11s, where people have the ability to grow, to evolve, and continue existing. There is so much you can glean from this series, and I can't recommend it enough.
Code Geass, and the beauty of this war arc is not the war arc itself. The war arc is merely a pawn in Lelouch's plan, and that's why this war is great. This war is great, not purely because of the epic fights and strategies taking place within the actual war, but that it was all a greater facade to what Lelouch was actually planning all along. Now, from this point forward, I highly suggest you watch Code Geass. I mean, I tried to use these war arcs as examples on how a war arc could be done right, without spoiling in case you have yet to see the series, but
this is going to be one of those. I will agree with Nux on this one. Context is going to help immensely here. So if you haven't watched it, even if you just want to watch this segment, I would argue please watch the whole thing. You could theoretically watch the Re 1, Re 2, Re 3, the retellings. I would recommend watching R1 and R2 fully. It's only 50 or so episodes. Would highly recommend you watch it before continuing this. If you haven't and you want to continue without spoilers, or with spoilers, you're more than welcome to stay here. This video will be here if you do want to go back through and watch it. There is a lot that goes into the final encounter.
in this case, bruh, you gotta watch Code Geass. It's legit one of the best things out there, and the ending is fantastic, and this video will spoil that ending. So please, I implore you, watch Code Geass before watching this video. Even if it results in less watch time for me, I will selflessly take that hit. Get it? Get the reference? Selflessly take it. Anyway, the point is, to quickly sum up the plot, Lelouch backhandedly somehow became the king and emperor of Britannia. Now,
this was following the esoteric conflict with Charles and Marianne, with Lelouch, C2, and Suzaku. So that follows what we were just discussing. There is a lot that leads up to that point, and I, once again, recommend you go and watch this. Going forward, we're going to go in with the understanding that the source material has been watched by you going into this, because there is a lot to unpack and a lot to discuss.
now, throughout the series, Lelouch really tried his hardest to destroy Britannia, so it's pretty epic and ironically hilarious that he managed to completely take over, mind control a bunch of the servant guys, and he has the strongest fighting force in the world. Well,
So the beauty on that is, in his own way, Lelouch did destroy Britannia. He did dismantle Britannia. You notice that a lot of the aristocrats at his coronation, his inauguration as the 99th Emperor of Britannia, a lot of those same people were seen, these aristocrats, these privileged elites, were seen in the next few scenes, what? Mopping floors, training with the grunts, so to speak, training with the military and the police force. They were removed from their aristocratic positions into other fields, into other workforces. Did he not dismantle the aristocracy, destroying the Britannia that he knew? Yes, in name, it is still Britannia, but its composition, the way it did things, was inherently different. So in a way, he did destroy the Britannian Empire.
it can only really be rivaled by the alliance of rebels that he himself built up to rebel against Britannia. We don't know what's going through his mind when he takes the position of king. We know that his former allies lost a lot of trust for him when they figured out he was an actual prince of Britannia all along, and they felt like they were betrayed by his lies. That said, it seems like he became the very thing that he swore to destroy. One epic battle later, with many epic scenes and strategies, epic fights and brawls, whammon and gentle whammon, Lelouch and by extension, Britannia, took the W, crushed the rebel alliance that he himself put together with his own two hands as the last fighting force against this oppressive Britannian empire. And with this, Lelouch finally became the emperor of the world, as well as the most hated person in the world.
I'm going to be honest. That was a very super summarized version of it, but he did that very well. There is so much that goes on in the Lelouch and Schneisel fight, the positioning, the intellect that goes into it, the emotions that go into it, and, you know, using bargaining chips like the hostage, like Kaguya, blowing up Mount Fuji, these Sakuradite mines, right? Along with the final confrontations of Lelouch and Schneisel, and Lelouch using a pre-recorded conversation, anticipating what Schneisel is going to say because he is predictable, and evidence that he is okay with losing. Back at I believe it was the Chinese embassy, where Schneisel and Zero had their game of chess, Schneisel was willing to show he is willing to sacrifice a win. He is willing to lose if it furthers his plan. He doesn't have that same drive to win that Lelouch does. And it's integral to his character, integral to his downfall as well. We see Colin and Suzaku atop the Avalon, that they are dueling with ideologies. Suzaku, someone that is angry and upset. You have to join the systems to change the system. Someone who is the means will justify the end. Where Colin is someone who has likewise seen the oppression of the Japanese people to no more than a number, no more than 11s. A series that tackles blatant racism, and Lelouch is a character throughout that will refer to them as Japanese and scoff at, oh, well, you're just an 11. We see very real examples in our own real world of dehumanizing people. And one day, you know, as an aside, I think that we can overcome that as people. I think that we can end conflict, not all conflict. I think that we can end conflict and come together to work together and become better than the sum of our parts. Colin is somebody that is frustrated because the systems don't work, and they are the pinnacle of nightmare pilots, and they clash atop the Avalon, and it's Colin who reigns supreme that day over Suzaku, whereas unfortunately it came down to Lelouch taking over. I'm sorry, it's the Damocles Avalon was something different, taking, you know, the key of Damocles, the imagery of a sword of Damocles, the Damocles hanging over the world, the sword of Damocles hanging over someone's head, the imagery. And Lelouch seizing victory, him understanding that Nunnally had come to the same conclusions that he had, and he had nothing else to teach her, and him being okay using his Geass to force her to relinquish the key to the Damocles. It's a very powerful final confrontation.
World. By doing what he did, in essence, he unified the entire world as his archenemies that all hate him. They all have the same philosophies, same ideologies. They all hate Lelouch and his empire that ruthlessly took over the world. Now, Lelouch finishes this epic plan off with the character Zero, a character he's been portraying this entire story as an ideal more than as an actual figure, and he had his friend dressed in this Zero uniform murder him in public. With him gone and the entire world completely unified at this point, the Mad Lad actually managed to cause world peace, and it became clear to only his closest friends that this was actually a charade, being that he was Zero. And as he quote-unquote died, he caused ultimate world peace. So
and that's actually where I subscribe to the Code Geass theory, where we actually do have confirmation of that in the Resurrection film. He did achieve Code Geass. He received Charles's code, and thus he didn't die, but at the same time, if you don't subscribe to the Code Geass theory and you want Lelouch to be dead, you are able to take the ending of that series with Lelouch is dead. The demon Lelouch has passed away. And that's why the ending is both concrete and ambiguous.
Now here's the thing. As far as superficial strategies go, and as far as an epic ending climax to a story, the entirety of this massive war, where Lelouch is going head-to-head against his brother who's outsmarted him several times in the past, where in the middle of this battle, they come up with technology to counter these nuclear weapons, where they put enough TNT into an effing volcano for it to erupt and do heavy damage to the...
Technically, Sakuradite itself, as far as I'm aware, is incredibly volatile, so while you could have enough explosives, Sakuradite itself was volatile enough that any sort of reaction, any sort of explosive that would cause a chain reaction would suffice. It didn't necessarily have to be buckets of C4 or TNT.
Land units. Characters that we've known since the beginning have died. Nanali overcomes this insane psychological issue out of pure blind hatred for her brother, who's loved her and taken care of her his entire life. The entire world saw Lelouch in an entirely different light. Lelouch completely played it up. There was a war that gave no, even slight hints to Lelouch's actual intentions, and after this entire war is over, and we're kind of sort of rooting for Lelouch, but at the same time, not really, because, you know, it's kind of like Bad Emperor 2 took the place of Bad Emperor 1. Yeah, we know Schneisel, the leader of the rebellion, is a dick too, so it's like the ultimate massive climax war, but everyone's a dick. So while the war itself was entertaining, it was in a really morally gray zone. And after all the casualties, after all the trauma everyone's been through, and after torturing so many of the characters we've known until this point, Lelouch rigs the game that the ideal of Zero that is created all along takes his life and causes world peace. Obviously,
it really is as simple as that. The symbol of hope, which people had attributed to, the Emperor at this point. Was it really Zero that killed him? And that's the importance of Colin at the end. You know, who is that who I think it is? Assuming it's no, is that Suzaku? It's Zero. It is the idea of Zero casting down the demon Lelouch. And it is beautiful as imagery.
this is the Zero Requiem, his ultimate strategy that this entire war continged on. And the reason why this is a war arc done right is because it completely fooled every other character in the series as well as every viewer. We all thought the war actually mattered for the sake of victory, but it wasn't clear at all that the entire victory is all for the sake of him causing himself to take the fall for the good of humankind. The world is now at complete peace, and the brilliantly created war arc was a success as a stepping stone to his actual plan.
I would argue that his victories were necessary to reach the Zero Welcome. I absolutely understand where Nux is coming from here in regards to it wasn't about the winning. It was about getting to a point where Lelouch could take upon the world's hatred unto himself, and with his expiration, he is able to bring about peace, to bring about unification in people, to bring people to the table, to have dialogues with each other, to work together to create a better world. In order to reach that point, victory was a necessity. We see this with, was it Bismarck Waldstein and him fighting against Suzaku, the Knight of One versus the Knight of Zero, Suzaku having to overcome Bismarck. If he didn't, the Zero Requiem would have failed. And we see this as well. Like, Schneisel does have the Damocles. He has access to the Flea, the improved Fleas, and victory is a necessity here. He must clear all opposition in order to cement himself as the sole entity that people's hatred is focused on. And that was technically Schneisel's intent with the Damocles, to bring about order with this proverbial sword of Damocles, the threat of the Flea, just the mere threat of it, to instill, demand order, demand peace. Whereas and thus we get into the argument of it's easier to hate a person than it is to hate an object. If people are united in hating the Damocles, and they live under consistent fear of Flea attack, it is a different feeling than living under a tyrannical emperor, than living under a incredibly authoritative tyrant. These do instill inherently different things, and the downfall of the crux of people's focuses have different things. If the Damocles fell, how long before the next super weapon happens? How long before, roving bands of nightmare gangs pop up, right? Unopposed, depending on the technology level, versus everyone being oppressed by the demon, the demon Lelouch, and his expiration bringing about this wave of relief. And we don't want this to ever happen again. How do we put checks and balances in place that this can never happen again? It is, yes, by design. He was a lightning rod of hate. He intended to take everyone's hatred onto himself and intended to take the fall. And actually, this is mirrored in another series, Guilty Crown, which a brilliant argument was done that Guilty Crown is Code Geass with a different answer. It's if Rivel got the power instead of Lelouch, and at the end, they came to a similar solution. Shu wanted to take the entirety of the Voids He wanted to take them unto himself and to remove himself from the equation. And then you get Iori saving him, which very, very brilliant anime. It's view it as like Code Geass, but with a different answer and a different way of getting to the end. It's actually really cool as a parallel. Lelouch needed victory. He needed to ensure that he got to the point where all eyes and all focus was pointed at him. In an MMO, think like this one person, he's the tank drawing aggro. He needed to ensure all eyes were on him.
I've honestly never seen that anywhere else, and that is why I wanted to make a video. But now here's the other thing.
I think Vinland Saga tried to do a similar thing.
Lelouch is a character that most of us have been fascinated by throughout the course of the Code Geass series. He is a Machiavellian character. In other words, he will do whatever it takes to get what he wants. He will manipulate people, and he will even potentially twist their own hopes and ideals against them so he can cause them to work for him, where technically they'd both benefit, but really mostly Lelouch would benefit. That was actually his point the whole time.
So Lelouch, as stated before, he is an ends justify the means. If it takes, let's go with the Geass order, right? If it takes executing the entire Geass order to make sure, in the end, no one else the curse of Geass can be, or gift, depending on your point of view, can no longer be distributed, and Britannia doesn't have this secret army of child soldiers with the Geass powers, right? More Rolos and stuff, right? In his worldview, Lelouch views this as a necessary step to ensuring that the ends are what he needs them to be. Where Suzaku could view the same action as morally reprehensible, and that, he needs to help these people and try to re-educate these people and reintegrate them into society, regardless of potential sleeper agent training, etc. And it's very interesting to see things from a Lelouch perspective and very interesting to see them from a Suzaku perspective. Which do you find? Do you think that the ends justify the means? Do you think that the means will always justify the ends? Or is the answer somewhere in the infinity of gray in between?
We've seen him do this the entire series, and he also sports the ideal of the end justifies the means. In the end of the day, casualties for a better end result are negligible. Now, Suzaku, a character that a lot of people hate, even though I personally don't, but still kind of get upset at sometimes, is supposed to be a complete antithesis to every ideology Lelouch possesses.
I believe he's a foil to Lelouch, if I understand the narrative trope correctly. He is a foil to Lelouch as a character and his ideology.
Does not believe the end justifies the means. You gotta always be doing the right thing and saving the most people at all times. We'll worry about the end when we get there. And at the same time, he's the opposite of Machiavellian. He will do the noble thing and never lie to anyone. They both want to change the Britannian government, so Lelouch does this by convincing a rebel army that he's fighting for the sake of Japan, when in actuality he's just fighting for the sake of revenge. And his plan is to take down Britannia. Suzaku, on the other hand, he joins the Britannian Empire to become a knight and hopes to rise in the ranks to the point that he can change it from the inside out. No casualties necessary. Now,
sometimes I think I should actually just watch the damn video, because I literally just explained all this, and I love that Nux goes so deep into this. It took him to a point in the script where it was relevant, like absolutely. I also just like talking about it. You can tell I'm very passionate about Code Geass as a series and the philosophies and morals it presents. It's such a excellent series, and we got there eventually, though. I'll take that Kip W. Thank you. I'll take the Kip W for already explaining this.
This philosophy is a bit too idealistic for Lelouch's take, and that's why they spend the majority of the series butting heads with one another. Now, what makes this war actually really fascinating from Lelouch's perspective is before this starts, he and Suzaku take on the entire world. There are going to be many heavy-duty casualties, and that doesn't seem very much like Suzaku, and Lelouch all of a sudden wants to take over the world and become the very thing he's despised until this point. Nothing adds up from their entire perspective from their previous philosophies as to what's going on in this fight. Now, the ending of the series, where Suzaku, who is assumed to be dead, takes the role of Zero, an ideal of freedom rather than an individual, and kills Lelouch, who at this point, in the eyes of the entire world, represents the antagonist, where the entire world is unified against him, causing peace. We see the evolution of both of these characters' ideological perspectives.
So here's the thing regarding Suzaku, is that Suzaku has a crisis of identity throughout the entirety of the series. We see Suzaku as being traumatized by his past and his decisions. He stabbed his father. Genbu Kurorugi, he stabbed him in an attempt that he thought would save the most lives to avert the war, which led to an unconditional surrender by Japan, being nothing more than a colony of Britannia and being labeled Area 11, with the Japanese reduced to nothing more than a number, than to 11s. In Suzaku's worldview, killing his father, a stout opposition of Britannia and Britannian occupation, was a necessary evil to save the most lives. And Suzaku blames himself for it every single day. He carries around that pocket watch. He, when Mao brings it up, he absolutely just can't. He ceases to function for a second. That is a secret that he's kept and is still ashamed by that decision. And we have Suzaku willing to dirty his hands later on, willing to take Lelouch in front of the Britannian Emperor and to use Lelouch as a bargaining chip. I want to become a Knight of the Round. And, leading into later actions in regards to when Suzaku's going to go after Lelouch, when Lelouch is currently on the run, right? Where the ends will justify the means. He's not unwilling to go against Lloyd. He's not unwilling to go against Miss Cecile, as at that point in his character development, he is willing to entertain that the ends will justify the means. And it isn't until after the conflict between Charles and Lelouch in C's world, it's not until after that conflict that, Suzaku, I would argue, goes back to the means justify the ends. And there's it's whoever Schneisel's second in command is, I can never remember his name, brings up a point in that Suzaku will betray those closest to him time and time again to better himself and his goals. And that is an astute observation at Suzaku in that period of time, leading into the Zero Requiem, where Suzaku, for all intents and purposes, is presumed dead. We do see Arthur at his gravestone, and Lelouch handing off the Zero Mask is symbolic of him handing over the idea of Lelouch. Suzaku may now live a life that he can be free of the mistakes of his past. He can choose how to go forward. He can choose to live as a knight for justice. If anything, choose to live with, the ends and the means both justifying themselves.
Perspectives on the world and life. Suzaku has learned that idealism only takes you so far, and this is a better option in this distinct scenario. And Lelouch, well, his quote-unquote death is absolutely fascinating. You can see his death from two perspectives. On the one hand, maybe he died. Maybe he actually grew a selfless bone in his body over his nefarious machinations throughout the entirety of the series and decided, yes, ending my life is better for the world and it should be done. It
wasn't that at all, though. It wasn't that he finally grew a selfless bone in his body. Yeah, there were casualties along the way. He did what he set out to do. He did dismantle Britannia, and actually a lot of that came from Schneisel himself, launching a flea at Pendragon, the capital. He dismantled Britannia, he dismantled the aristocracy, and became, in his own decision, became the demon the world needed to unify around. And in doing so was a selfless act. He knew if the Zero Requiem succeeded where this was going to lead. I would argue that the entirety of the Zero Requiem was selfless, but I mean, I guess that could be a subjective viewpoint.
Against his Machiavellian philosophy in entirety, and it proves that his altercation with his father in the Ragnarok Connection actually helped him grow as a character. His father decided, why have free will and why have people die if we can live in some form of endless Tsukuyomi type thing? And Lelouch says there's no purpose to that. That's an entirely different philosophical discussion fit for another day, but the point is that altercation developed his character and Suzaku's character to the point that Suzaku realized, yes, a world without choice and without death would be meaningless, so the idealistic route is not necessarily always the correct one. And Lelouch grows from this, seeing that he is not his father, and he will actually find a peaceful resting place for the world. Now,
Lelouch seeks the future, Charles sought the past, and Schneisel sought the present. Each of them seeking different things and flawed in their own philosophies. At the end of the day, people will cling to the future. People will cling to hope that situations might become better, that one day conflict might be avoided and, an end put to many of them, that we may one day work together with, in tandem with each other to become greater than the sum of our parts. Lelouch grows from that interaction and, going into that stubborn, potentially losing hope even, comes out stronger than ever. His conviction and resolve steeled, knowing what he must do to help unify the world. There is so much development that happens in that Ragnarok connection. There is so much that happens in C's World between Charles and Lelouch having their debate, their verbal conflict.
This is all purely speculation of his psychology and philosophy based on the fact that he dies at the end of Code Geass. As it remains ambiguous in the series, I'm not talking about the movies, there are many theories floating around on how he could have survived that if he gained immortality from one way or another. Not the point, but the beauty is, if he did survive, then his Machiavellian personality from the entirety of the show did not change one iota, and his altercation with his father didn't help him develop into a new philosophy, but instead, it strengthened his old one. That is why
I would argue it strengthened his old philosophy, and at that point in time, Lelouch did everything he set out to do. Britannia, as it, for all intents and purposes that it was no more. And whether Lelouch died or lived really is technically even not the point. Because at the end of the day, Lelouch, the demon, is perceived as dead, whether he remains 6 feet under, or whether he obtained Code Geass, obtained Charles's code, and became immortal, and as well as keeping his Geass. At the end of the day, Lelouch was no longer in the limelight. People assumed him dead, MIA, KIA, whatever you will. And Lelouch could go back to living a simpler life. Lelouch could step out and let people make their own choices. He did what he could to break the current systems and give people a chance to have a better future, which would go into the movies nicely. I still headcanon the movie. I know the resurrection is after RE1, RE2, and RE3. I can still headcanon it a little bit after R2, which I know a lot of people do take a lot of issue with personally. And, the peace was being disrupted by Azadistan. And what's her face? I can't remember her name. The Lelouch parallel. I can't remember her name offhand. And at the end of the day, did he make some grandiose event out of it? Or did he go in and get the job done to the best of his ability after he was resurrected? Arguably, he didn't want to be a public figure. He didn't want the limelight. He did what he needed to get Nunnally safe, and then he left, evident by the plan that this is not a torch and burn op. This is not a we have to defeat everyone op. This is priority one. We rescue Nunnally and then extract, right? So I would argue, yes, it did strengthen his philosophy. Character change and growth did happen in C's World, but he did develop his philosophy further, which led to the Zero Requiem.
Why I love the ambiguous ending of Code Geass, and that's why this war arc, which is such a small glimpse at his character and what his mind is actually thinking throughout, is so goddamn fantastic. This is the best damn ending of any anime I've ever seen in my entire life, and there is no close second, at least not yet, and at least not to me. This ambiguous ending is perfect. People who see it one way or another, like it's black and white, I feel like miss the beauty of the ambiguity. We're left forever thinking if he's evolved his philosophy into a new one, which explains every single course of action he's taken throughout this entire war and his alleged death, or did it strengthen his previous philosophy, which also explains every single action in this entire war, including his alleged death, in a completely different freaking way. Ladies and gentlemen, share this video with your friends. Needs to get known. And also subscribe, buy my merch, enjoy the War Arc series. Check out my other episodes of War Arc analyses. Whammon and Gentle Whammon, I'm glad I made this video. Even though my War Arc series is not really getting views, I don't care. Core fan base sees it, and that's what freaking counts. Also share it with your friends, because I didn't do a good job convincing myself that views don't matter. Also, go watch Code Geass if you haven't heeded my warning and spoilery shiz attacked you. It's amazing throughout. Have yourselves a most wonderful evening, and remember to stay weird, fam.
It was a good video. It was an awesome video. I might go back and I want to see. I'm curious on his opinions of. I'll have to watch the honest opinions at some point, maybe off stream. I'm very curious on how he rated the Naruto War Arc. I'm very curious because I saw that was maybe a video in there. I'd be very curious on that. This was a very good video. I know that people do have their reservations against Nux Taku in regards to the VShojo incident, and as somebody that was around when that was blowing up, and I have my own personal views on it, none of which I will share here because honestly, it's a dated situation. People are allowed to grow. People are allowed to change. People are able to settle things behind closed doors in a not public light. And I don't want that to mar, any public opinion or sentiment that at the end of the day, this was a good video. I love when I come across creators that are able to look at Code Geass and they're able to dissect it in certain ways. It's like watching a video on Madara Uchiha versus somebody who's just going to be like, oh, Madara OP, wipes Itachi, easy, clap, versus somebody that's going to go into the trauma Madara Uchiha has received and potentially what his Mangekyo could have been, what his proverbial wish was from my Mangekyo wish theory, right? And how he grows as a character and how he ends as a drinking buddy with Hashirama. Code Geass is a series that is, for all intents and purposes, my favorite anime, and it will continue to be so. There is so much to cover. There's so much to delve into, and there's, even on every rewatch, there's things to consider, there's things to think about, there's parallels to draw, and check how it clashes or meshes with my current philosophies on life. It is a good anime. It has a lot of mech fun. It has a lot of fan service in certain parts, for those of you that are interested in that. And I do think that Nux and his team did do a good job here. So I just don't want a old situation of about a few years ago at this point to evolve into something that, isn't necessarily the best. And don't get me wrong, I have my professional disagreements with Nux Taku and other capacities from older videos, but it's nothing to, cancel the dude about. People are allowed to grow. People are allowed to change. People are allowed to look at their philosophies. Look at what we just watched, Code Geass. Your quote unquote come to Jesus moment, where you are presented with a conflict, you're presented with an obstacle or problem, and you adapt and overcome, or you fail and let failing systems continue to take place. What are your thoughts, though? Just wanted to do my best to make sure to, from an unbiased manner as possible, to say that this was an excellent video, very thought-provoking, very well done. The editing was great. The sound selection was amazing. I thought that this was great. And honestly, yeah, I'm a little shocked that it only has 300,000 views. I'd love to see that at 400,000, a million, etc. This is not necessarily everyone's cup of tea, but it did very well. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on Code Geass? What are your thoughts on the War Arc? What are your thoughts on Suzaku and Lelouch? What are your thoughts on the ends justifying the means, or do the means in fact justify the end? All that fun stuff. Let me know in the comment section. Please, as always, keep it civil. Please keep discussion in regards to Nux VShojo to a minimum, if not at all, please. As I'm not the drama channel, I don't want to really take place in that, and people have moved beyond that situation. And I will see you in the next one.